podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. This is the Ask Your Oldhead Podcast with Justice Rajee. In this episode, I invited 4 brothers that I had the pleasure to work with and connect with around policy and programming and other things right here in the city, Portland. And their names are Lakayana, Kevin Modica, Cupid Alexander, and CJ Robbins. I'll let them speak for themselves on their titles and the work that they do. But I wanted to get a circle of Black men together just to talk about some things, understand some things prior to the election. So although you're going to be listening to this recording, likely today or tomorrow, whatever time that is, but now understand that these thoughts were recorded prior to, the events of Tuesday and the subsequent events of this week. And I had a very specific intent with that, but I'm hoping that you find something in our conversation that, is useful, motivating, energizing, and, as always, take the best part for yourself. Here we go. Peace. Peace. This is a super special edition of the Ask Your Oldhead Podcast with me, Justice Rajee, and I have welcomed 4 gentlemen I have had the privilege and honor to work with in the community here in Portland and connect with as members of this community in my time here in the city. And what I'll do is I'll just give each of you a chance to just introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there. So I'm Justice. I will pass to Cupid.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, night, whenever y'all listening to this. Cupid Alexander, formerly with the Portland Mayor's office, now headed to new adventures. I shall pass this back down to CJ.
Good day to everyone. My name is CJ Robbins. I coordinate Black male achievement efforts for the city of Portland. So I will pass to Chief.
Well, good evening. Kevin Modica here. I am a retired City of Portland employee. I retired from the Portland Police Bureau as an assistant chief. I currently work as a legislative aide to Senator Lou Frederick.
Lakayana.
Yes, sir. Lakayana Drury here, Executive Director of Word is Bond. Happy to be on the podcast for the second time and really honored to be part of this super special edition with so many great Black leaders in the community that I look up to.
Awesome. Word up. So, we had a conversation last week, and, elections are a major part of our democracy, right? That's clear. However, elections tend to, and especially the election for president, tends to become a cyclical. Every 4 years, everyone gets excited and interested, who may not normally be as attentive to, public policy and political process. Also, we've had in the mix the last, really more than several months, but it is elevated, I think, every week, sort of this conversation around Black men and Black men's roles in national elections and our, either apparent positioning or where that's at. And then there's always the conversation, is always our focus around engagement, around the issues that are taking hold of, the issues that are directly impacting Black men and trying to improve their outcomes and their situation and station and condition, and also seeing that as an area that we focus on, not necessarily to the denial of other areas of care and concern, because we understand that we are members of the community just as much as we are actors within the community in terms of who we're connected to, our families, we're brothers, sisters, we got all kinds of networks that we're plugged into. So wanted to have a space prior to the election because the underlying issues that impact us will still be underlying issues after the results of tomorrow. But the strategies, the priorities, the focuses may be adjusted, but the issues remain the issues, and they will always be the issues till they're resolved to a competent level. So, enough of me setting up structure here. I wanted to just get a sense where brother's energy is it at the moment, and I'd like to start with our elder chief, and then maybe go to whoever chief chooses. So, Chief, where's your energy at right now?
Oh, my energy is optimistic, but I cannot deny that there is a bit of fatigue. It's been a long 4 years and a even longer, it seems like 2 years in the city of Portland. There's so much to be attentive of. And so, my refocus is really post-election. What is it that is going to be done to support Black men and boys and other men and boys of color, but particularly Black men and boys in the city of Portland and the state of Oregon? And I pass to Cupid Alexander.
Thank you for that, Chief. When Justice asking the question of where my energy is where it's always been, right? And it sits with the community. And I know that there's a heightened awareness of the impact of the decisions that are going to be made by the newly elected leader, hopefully newly, but we shall see. And then there's just that level of anxiety. I was talking prior to us starting this podcast about kind of managing that and not getting drawn into the political theater, but being very aware. So, just to start off, that's where I'm at. I'll go ahead and pass this down to Lakayana.
Yeah, where I'm kind of feeling, and one of our other members had kind of mentioned something similar earlier. It's just that, when people are listening to this 2 days from now, at first I was a little concerned that this would be outdated by the time Wednesday rolls around, but actually it won't. And I had this kind of thought as I was taking a walk this afternoon that the country will be as racist as it is, as when you listen to this on Wednesday, as it is as we are speaking right now on Monday. The game landscape might shift. It's like a game of checkers, or chess. The pieces might move slightly, but as long as we understand the system, and people shouldn't be shocked or newly surprised on Wednesday, as the system is going to maintain itself as it currently is. And so for me, and I think for other members of BMA, it's about building long-term power, regardless of what happens on Tuesday night, because we know no matter who wins, that the hill is still going to be a large one to climb up. And so that's the mindset that I'm trying to just prepare myself for, is just, it's the same system Wednesday as it is today, and it is going to be tomorrow. I'll pass it to CJ.
Thanks for that, Lakayana. My energy is in a couple of places. One, I believe. I think it's really important to remind ourselves and to remember as a people that we have to believe whatever it is that we want to happen can happen. So I think that's first and foremost. We have to constantly remind ourselves. If we think it, if we believe it, it can happen. And if we believe in concert with each other. I'm also concerned, I'm concerned. And I just say, I would say that's a cautious energy, a cautious feeling. I don't think much changes. I'm in agreement with Lakayana. I'm really glad you said that. about the country's just going to be as racist in a couple of days as it is today. It's like, you ask a kid, do you feel older on your birthday? And they're like, no. And they just turned, 9 or 10, No, you're going to be 2 days older, and we're going to be 2 days distance from where the racism that we have as a country now. And so no matter who wins, I think we have to move as a people. We have to move towards the plan that we have for ourselves as a people. So.
Thank you. So the first thought I had, and I think you kind of actually teed into it a little bit there, CJ, with your response, because we, in our collective work together and separate in the places that we move, I think we wrestle with people. We wrestle with process, right? When you're talking about a system or a system level change, you have structures that are in place, and then you also have what's in the mind and in the hearts of the people. And so I want to ask, and I think I'll ask you first, CJ, this question: what is something that you think is missing from the way our sort of discussion about Black men in this moment is framed? Around our issues. What is there something that you feel is either missing or maybe should be added to not just come from a deficit perspective?
I think I will say thank you for that question, Justice, about what's missing. I think I will say this. I'll frame it this way. A lot is missing. The current conversation is not about, most conversations are not about Black men, and the current conversation is not about Black men. It's about the people who actually have power. And if that was Black men, then the conversation would be about us. But instead, it's about other groups. It's about Antifa and their movement. It's about white nationalists. I would say sometimes we get the discussion that Black women want to have out there. Sometimes, but very rarely, right? But never are we hearing Black men's voice. So I will just say that. I know you asked for specific ways, but I just want to say from a contextual, yes, that happens. Black men, the voice is not out there, and then I would actually invite in Cupid for one of the specifics. That's what I did.
Yeah, I think Justice, can you rephrase that question again? Because I was trying to write it down so I could understand it.
Yeah, I was saying, what is something that either is missing in terms of getting Black men's voice or responding to Black men's issues, or also what would be something that could be added, in the way that these things are addressed or the way we engage especially around change and system change.
Right. I mean,
sorry, I get to reframing questions sometimes.
No, that's good. No, I think the number one thing, first of all, is that there's a clear power dynamic that puts Black men, Black boys, Black people at a numerical disadvantage in a system that uses like a majority rules type of decision-making process that actually puts us at that advantage, right? And then you can put in different sorts of racial animuses or discriminatory, thoughts or, actions that further, entrench us in these systems that are discriminatory. So I think, first of all, the hard thing in the work that we've been trying to do is figure out how to navigate spaces and influence policies that are kind of addressed by majority rules, and I think that that's what we've constantly been engaging with. What we've seen locally and what you're starting to see nationally is just greater attempts at organizing around specific issues to see better outcomes. So you'll see it with safety and policing, and you've seen it with like housing, and you see it with kind of trying to influence the political spectrum through even locally, there's the People of Color Political Action Committee. And then you're seeing what we're doing around like anti-gentrification work, so anti-displacement work. And then you're also seeing it a great deal with some of the leaders, even on this, where they're organizing around specific items as far as policing goes there's a quote that says, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. And I'm starting to see that we're getting smarter with how we're organizing, addressing everything, knowing that we just do not have the numbers. And we haven't even made the case for what's like logical for human beings. And so I think that what we're seeing is in the way that we're influencing, especially because the gap that I'm seeing is this power gap, is that we're starting to see a lot of our leaders and a lot of our smart, young, up-and-coming youth focusing on things, and they're doing it one at a time.
All right. Thank you. So, Lakayana, as someone that's been building a program that I think is targeting kind of the dual role of kind of education and connection for young men, but then also sort of giving them sort of like, here's how you start engaging, with the systems that are around us and some of the powers that are around us. I hope that's accurate. You feel that's an accurate interpretation of some of the work you do. If
Absolutely.
not, that's cool.
I appreciate that outlook.
What's something that you see, from your vantage point, and I know about the relationships that you have with lots of young people from your background as an educator, that tying into that idea of being targeted with strategy and other things. What are some things that you're seeing that we, regardless of how the election goes, we need to be jumping into, as people that are trying to make change?
Can you say that question one more time? I really want to think about that.
So, from your vantage point, what are some of the things that we need to be doing to improve or to create opportunity to connect and be responsive to young people broadly and young Black men, especially around like the relationship of power and changing things when we're trying to engage with systems?
Yeah. So here's what I would suggest. It's Wednesday. You're waking up. We're in some political reality, some new political reality. What I would say is don't forget about the young people in your life and connecting them with the conversations that you are going to have throughout today and the subsequent days. Whether they're 3, whether they're 5, whether they're 15, whether they're 21, there is a discussion to be had that they should be a part of, and carving out time out of your day and in the following days to have those conversations with them, because they are around in it and are going to be hearing it and are going to be impacted by the energy of the adults in their lives. And so being able to engage them in that process, especially for young people maybe who were just under the age of able to vote, right? 16, 17 years old, who did a lot of activism and a lot of work on the ground over the summer and into the fall, and allowing engaging them in the process and seeing how they're feeling, because they're of age where they are impacted most definitely by the decisions, but then they're also not able to fully engage in it the way that they want to. And so how do you have conversations with them? How do you have conversations with even the younger folks or the younger kids about how this impacts them and why voting is so important and why they might see adults around them in many different forms? Because there's a lot of anxiety around adults going into this election. And I think we do ourselves a disservice by not engaging youth and saying, well, they don't understand, or they're too young to get it, or, I'm so caught up in processing my own feelings that I'm not thinking. So, and I think a lot of it's going to be like we unintentionally just kind of forget about them. Like they just kind of get put on the back burner. But I think, honoring their presence by engaging them in that. And then I would also say, depending on who wins, I think there's also a lot to be said. And I think this also gets overlooked, that we are on the verge of electing the first woman and the first Black person to the vice president office of the United States. And because of the nonsense of Donald Trump, that has been the central issue, that Kamala Harris's president or candidacy has been overlooked. And so being able to talk about that, especially with our Black daughters and Black women about the impact of that, I think is going to be a huge conversation. And I'm confident that she's going to be in there, that we're going to have a sister there. So having that conversation of what does that mean now that we have now elected a Black person to both positions, understanding the limitations of that, but also understanding the cultural significance of that as well.
Indeed. Thank you. So, Chief, of those of us present, you have seen more of these than any of us. What is something, or do you have a tactic, something that a way you approach this season, right? In light of the idea of structural change and power and engagement, to keep your focus, to keep your energy around what are your priorities? Is there something that you can give us to make sure we, stay where we need to be?
Well, I truly believe the best philosophy is to stay present, right? And yes, been through a few elections, and the current environment dictates that we must stay present in the moment. Once all the ballots are counted, we have the result that we will live with for the next 4 years. However, we talk a lot about manipulating phenomena, right? So if there is a gap that is present to us now regarding promises, campaign speeches, or the attempt to manipulate phenomena that impacts us as citizens, that's what we focus on, right? I mean, all politics are local. Yes, there's a federal election, but our federally elected senators and congressmen and state congressmen and state reps and congresswomen and council members and mayoral candidates, that's local. And I presume to think that the analysis that people have put into their ballot choices includes identifying the gaps that must be addressed immediately the day after. And quite frankly, one of the things that has been missing locally is what is your plan, particularly regarding redirect of monies? Who did you ask? And I'm not always satisfied with the answer of, well, we asked the people. My sensing in the community is that no, you didn't. And if your plan involves continued loss and extraction from Black and Brown communities, that you have something to answer to, right? So that's how I approach it. I always wait until the day before election day to personally put my ballot in the ballot box, because I continue to analyze all the candidates and or thought changes for myself and also other people that I consult, that I consider thought leaders, which includes young people. In my life, yes, there are young people that I know, but the young people I'm connected to, they're little young people. They're depending on us to make things right so that as they come up and they start to comprehend and they can articulate that their voice is heard, that they have place. And quite frankly, at my age, I am so disappointed that I still have to worry about what somebody who's white or somebody who hates folks that are non-white may do, attempt to do, or say to me, my family, and my circle. That is, it's unconscionable, it's unacceptable, and as I said, you got to stay present in this moment.
Thank you. So I want to pitch this to, I think, Cupid on this one, because something you brought up in there around process, Chief, and when things are being, when we're putting forward a policy or a change. Cupid, what is something that we, how ready should we be? Like, when you're coming to the table, and this, I'm thinking about this as a proactive, looking into next year, looking into the year after that. If you're a community member and someone said, Cupid, I want to get something done, what's a piece of pre-work they should do before they even go to the meeting to first talk about what they want done?
No, I think that's the question, right? It's like, how do we show up at this table? I think the gentlemen on this podcast have been indicating that a deep engagement with the community, specifically the youth who might not have been involved in the process, is the first thing that you should be doing, right? Because politics is like a process that's used for an outcome. But I've said this before, politics is not the outcome. And so that outcome has to be influenced and infused and informed by those who are closest to the problems themselves. I believe those who are closest to the problems are closest to the solution. So when you're thinking of, like, how do I show up at this table? I want to get something done. The first part is understanding what you would like to get done and kind of even building a constituency around seeing that done. And then from there, that's where you use the political process for an outcome that's informed by the community. The problem that we've seen a lot of times is that these outcomes are not informed by the community, which is why people are like, well, who did you talk to? And when did you talk to them? And did you talk to the youth? And yes, they vote. And even if they didn't vote, shouldn't you engage with them? Shouldn't you engage with the individuals who are going to be impacted by this? And sometimes people say, yeah, we did. And other times they say, yeah, we kind of did. And I think that in order for you to begin these processes, it is highly important that you're deeply engaging with those who are going to be affected, whether they're centered on it, whether they're kind of tertiary to it. And if we're talking about Black men and Black boys and Black people, I think you have to understand also the historical impact. So when you show up to discuss these things, they know that you know how this came to be. And if not, that's okay. Sit down with them and try and understand what as much as you can about it before moving something forward. I think that that's important, because what we end up talking a lot about is like political theater. We're talking about the process, but we're not really talking about the product. We're like, you got to go to council, and then you got to go to your state legislature and all these other things. And the product sucks versus like really understanding like what the community needs, because there's no matter how many times we have these discussions, I think we end up talking about the same thing. There's not like that deep, authentic community engagement. And usually when there is, it's transactional. But a lot of the community leaders will say, don't come to us with this again. We've been telling you the answer and you keep getting it wrong. So I think, just to answer your question really quickly, after my long statement, is that, you start off with that deep engagement. That's how you end up showing up at the table, because once you're informed of that, the rest can be kind of molded and you can go through that process. But I think you can't have that start without really being informed by those who are going to be the most impacted.
All right. Thank you. So, CJ and Locke, I'd like both of you to answer this question, because I think you both have to kind of parse this particular issue. And that is, as someone who is sometimes serving, within government, or at least like advisory to government, and system, right? But you're also a community member. So how do you wrestle with, you being yourself as a community member, but then also you being in a role where you're, sort of within certain pieces of system? And now I'll tip to you first, CJ, and then you, Lakayana.
Yeah, I think first and foremost is something that you hear a lot of brothers saying, which is you're in your public position or your government role or any of that work temporarily, no matter how you slice it. But you have been in your black skin your whole life, and you will continue to be in your black skin as long as you're walking this earth. So first and foremost is remembering that reality, remembering that you're black first. You've always been black, and that your version of black is black enough. You are black, right? Um, the most important thing in that identity to me is your connection to your people. And so, at the end of the day, you have to be rooted with your people. You have to be connected to your people. You have to care, right? All of those things that are just, I would say, uh, parts of general humanity. That's what I would say. All of that, and then so there's that, and then you have to know that your responsibility to yourself, to the larger communities, and to your own community is to be honest, to be forthright, and to make sure that you are sharing information openly with community. You're sharing information openly, right? And being very honest about what opportunities there are, that you're putting community members in a position to advocate for themselves, and that you're honest internal to the government and all the institutions that you're in. When it's easy to just sit and be quiet or to just listen, that you're honest with what your observations are of what's happening within that community, and particularly for my position as Black Male Achievement Coordinator, my role is to focus specifically on Black men and boys, and the harm that's occurred and that continues to occur for Black men and boys, right? And to understand that harm, and then also within understanding that harm, to understand the remedies to that, right? To know how we address what racism looks like, right? Internal to the system, and that's we know that what marginalization looks like. We know that it looks like disparities in every single category, right? And so being able to know what the harm is, find the harm, be honest when people present solutions that will not work, and your community knows will not work, and to walk that line of honesty, remembering that the way that you walk that line is you're forthright and you're honest, but it's about people and it's about outcomes. So you don't, the way that you don't put information in ways that to harm people. You just lay it out flat and honest. When people in institutions want things to change, those things will change. And when the institution's rules and their policies, practices, and procedures are aligned for that change, those things will change. And so, just an honest pragmatism. That's what I would say.
All right. How about for you, Lakayana? What's how do you walk that line of community member, but also being in some roles where you have to engage with the systems, or have to at least wrestle with some rules or structures in terms of your awareness.
Yeah, I would say that I don't that I operate in the same way as I would as a community member, as I would when I'm in my circles, because that's who or when I'm in city circles or government circles, because that's who I represent. Um, we I teach our young men a lot about code switching and being able to adapt to the environments that they're in, and that in certain instances you have to change your demeanor or how you approach things. But one thing I don't do is I don't culture switch. You know what I'm saying? I put on and represent for the culture in the same way in every instance, whether I'm having a dialogue with you guys on a BMA daily call, whether I'm talking with one of our young men and trying to help him plan for his future, or a young woman, I used to teach as well, or I'm serving as co-chair of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. I bring a pro-Black lens, community-driven lens CJ said, remembering that I'm a Black man, a biracial man, and the experiences, I can't and don't separate myself. I don't have different versions of me or different agendas that show up. I'm constantly thinking about our community and our culture, and that's how I approach it. And I do, as they say, keep that same energy
Mm-hmm.
no matter what circle that I might be in.
All right. So, the place I started this conversation talking about elections, and that especially our national election, always it's this, it's the curious cycle where people get really, really energized. And I think this particular election, amidst everything that's happened this year, is at a maybe the highest level of stakes that at least that I see people demonstrating their level of feeling, right, than that I can recall. But I'm concerned, and it's something I think we try to work on with the things that we've been doing with the town halls, with all just the work that all of you do, generally as community members and as in your professional roles. But what are some steps that maybe we could take to move, like organizing around public policy? Because that's the lens that I look at. That the politician goes in to work on the policy, right? In service to the constituency that they, feel obligated or accountable to. And I think as we've talked about in some of our conversations, when there's, as this summer has been challenging here in terms of not just challenging, devastating in many ways in terms of the community violence, if you are hoping to interrupt something where you don't have the connections to interrupt it, it's kind of too late to worry, like to get the connections to stop it right now, but you want to get the connections for later. So I'm trying to apply that thinking to, this election world and this election energy. What is some steps, and I want to maybe start with you, Chief. What are some things we can do to move sort of the organizing and the conversation around public policy, like out of this 4-year interest thing, to more of our community, and especially get, just take it away from being something that's so controlled by this 4-year, kind of time frame? Is there anything that you feel we could do, in your wisdom and your experience?
Participate, stand up, let your voice be heard, go testify. But I think that's almost too easy and too simple, because in many cases what you get is airtime. But I think you must pay attention to the processes that we know have to occur. Everything from legislative sessions to knowing the budget calendar for the state, the budget calendar for the city. I mean, even the local conversation is the fall bump process, the BMP. I don't think many people even know what that is, right? That's just really the cleanup session for budgeting when you've either overspent or you under budgeted and you need more money. The challenge is, how do you get the decisions to impact livability in the correct ways? I think that there is room to confront power with cogent demands. But I do believe that it's the collective voice that must be used. I look at the protests, right? And there are many theories about the protests. There are many theories about who's calling the shots. There's many theories about why there's damage, why there's violence, if it's unilateral, if it's coordinated, if it's tactical. One thing for sure, we have politicians that have climbed on board, and they've showed up on some front steps and said a few words, or showed up on the stage and said a few words and took advantage of the synergy, right? It's almost like mirroring the collective voice when in fact, the purpose of the collective voice, the voices behind that purpose were never considered and never consulted. And these are the type of things that I think we must have the community courage, right? You have many types of courage, right? If you work in agency, you have organizational courage, right? Task maturity, psychological maturity. But I think the community courage is to stand up. And if you're not being represented, and if all of the wonderful things that have been promised are not going to occur in any way, shape, or form that is going to increase your livability, your ability to attain wealth, your ability to continue on a road to good health, your ability to obtain good education for you and yours, then you must use that collective voice and be present. Don't go to sleep, people. Just because election day is almost here and then it will expire, do not go to sleep. Do not become complacent.
All right. Peace. Um, what I'd like to do, because I don't want to take too much of you good brothers' time tonight, and I want to give you opportunity if there's something that you want to make sure it's been said, and to give that as our closing to this conversation. So I can just pick someone to go first, or if somebody feels they got something on their heart they want to rock with. It looks like Cupid. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll just end with my statement to your previous question, though. It's like in between election cycles, there's iterative work that is being done. And we were having a conversation before we even got on this podcast that a lot of these policies are transcendent, that it doesn't matter who's in a position to vote, that these policies affect people, and that's daily. So that's the call out that we have. And there are several ways that you can approach doing some of this work. One is staying informed, and that's a reputable source. Two is staying connected to your constituency and to City Hall. I mean, not even to City Hall, to your constituency and to your neighbors. And three is getting a better understanding of the process, because if you do not understand the process, it's hard to figure out how to influence that. And those are things that are done all the time. And, I'm not someone who's relatively good at that, but I've become better at it as a result of understanding what it is. You do not have to, and I can't say this enough, you do not have to be brilliant to be a part of these processes. I've seen people who are not the most brilliant, and they're guiding whole strategies for entire sections of cities. You can do this, but I think it's understanding how to do that and how to show up. And I just outlined 3 ways. And so that's what I'm going to leave with.
All right. P. CJ or Locke, either one. CJ.
And I was trying to think of something super slick to say, but I'll just end with this. I posted this on my Twitter maybe a week ago, but November, what is it going to be, 4th, is a start date, not a finish line. I know that there's a lot of energy and expense and exhaustion that's going to come on that on Wednesday, but it's honestly just the beginning, and encouraging us to think about, okay, with the pieces that we have, a Black agenda is still a long ways off. We're going to get, especially here in Portland, depending on how the pieces fall, there's a number of things that we may or may not get, but we're not going to get all of it. So keeping that outlook, how do we build long-term power? How do we consolidate ourselves? How do we build towards what my vision is? And it's not a utopian vision, but a Black bloc that operates here in Portland, that votes, spends money, coordinates education. We don't all have to get along we don't all have to be best friends in order for that to happen. And I think sometimes we think it's farther away than it actually is. And so I would just encourage us to think about, where do we go next? As I said earlier, the country is no more racist or less racist than it was 2 days ago. So don't let the election, whether your candidates succeed or not, stem our outlook and say, well, oh, to hell with it, or this things can't work out. Like, we're still operating within the same system. We won some pieces and we've lost some pieces. Where do we go from here? And how do we move towards a vision where Black Portland lives up to its promise, which is to operate more connectively together?
P. CJ.
Yeah, I really appreciate this question too, Justice. I agree 100% with what Lakayana is saying, in that, and I think it's possible, right? I think we as a people can connect that way, in some fundamental ways that we don't see now, that you do see in other cities, right? I think that we as Black people in Portland can do that. And I think I would lean really into what Cupid said about connecting. And I would put a little finer point on that. I think the way we find our direction and the way we become stronger is we find more ways as a people to connect on what our plan is. Right? That means finding alliances at times with people that we may disagree with on other issues. Right? I also would encourage people to follow the money, right? As you're learning and getting information from reputable sources, follow the money. Right now we are at a point where tax revenue is falling. That's putting it lightly. It's going to be way lower in the next couple of fiscal years, right? So pay attention to where every dollar is going when it comes to your government entities. Pay attention to where every dollar is going and make demands based on what you want for our community. Make demands, right? You need to know where to show up. You need to know how to show up. I'm sure every single brother on this call could help you with some of that information, right? Or on this connection on this podcast, could help you with that information, right? So, because we're all connected in different ways to the system, to systems, and we do work to change those systems, right? So we know where access points are. We know how people in the community can do work to change the system. We know how they can connect to change the system. So yeah, we're available to community for those things, to answer that question of where and when to show up. And then last but not least, I would say I want to lean a little bit into what Chief said earlier, which is there has been a movement and an effort to move money and change money in the city government and in other governments. I'm telling you, community, don't stand still or not pay attention to where money is going. If there are things that you have and you have needs in the community, this is the time to press them. This is the time to put in the work and to connect and to tell anyone and everyone, as many as you can, what your demands are and what your neighborhood needs and what the people in your neighborhood need. So I just wanted to say those few things, add on to a few of the points of the brothers here.
Indeed. And circle back to you, Chief. Anything you want to add? Just to
No, I say that I'm so proud to be affiliated with a group of brothers in a collective circle like this. That just standing up and leaning into it and moving forward beyond all the panic and concern and thank you for the opportunity to share. I sincerely look forward to the next time that we have the opportunity to chop it up in this regard.
All right. Peace. So I'll close with my own statement on this is, we, and this is my Justice's personal perspective, the challenge of power and activating, power in space and defining reality in your own terms, brings the tension and the conflict and the stress of sometimes a failure, of sometimes of folks maybe not seeing the vision that you see, the oversteps, the missteps, the errors, the things you miss. However, we, as in my perspective, can't get the things that we want. We can't get the system to change the way we need it to be changed if we're not willing to risk activating what we have and cueing into something, leaning to something that I've heard from several of you over the times that I've known you. We have everything that we need, right? And so let's not be bashful. Let's get out and engage. Let's connect. Regardless of what happens, the strategy and the priorities change, but the needs of the people, the needs of our communities, and the strengths that we've all been developing, the skills that brothers bring to the table, they still gonna have those skills on Wednesday or Thursday and next week. I might not be able to dunk a basketball right now, but that's all right. You know what I'm saying? I got time. I'll catch back up. But in any regard, I thank y'all for joining me tonight. And I think we will say peace.
Peace, Brother Justice. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Peace, brother.
Thanks, Justice. Peace.
Thanks, Justice. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Ask Your Oldhead Podcast with Justice Rajee. Thank you to my guests, Lakayana, Modica, Cupid, CJ. I really, really appreciate y'all joining me. And thank you to you for listening. I know we are, still in the web, the wings of whatever's going to come out, with the election results, at least on the national stage. But as we talked about here in this discussion, the work continues regardless of who's in office. Just the strategies, the priorities, what you're going to do, how you organize, how you focus on whatever your work and whatever community building that you're doing. So I hope that you pull something from our conversation that gives you a little bit of motivation, a little bit of positive energy, and be a proactive force wherever you're at in the world. You can support the podcast by finding me on Patreon, becoming a patron. Several different little options. Put a little bit monthly in to keep this here production rolling. Also, you can do the best thing, which is listen and share. So check out the podcast whenever you can. Ask Your Oldhead, Good Brothers, and more to come. In any event, I thank you. Please be safe. Peace.